Hello, everybody. I am really happy to be preparing our next edition of Employer Branding Unplugged. This is cool. I am sitting with Gina Selak from Sports Entertainment Network. Is that how I say it?
It is.
SEN.
You're correct.
And also Gareth from Schnitz. Gareth and I have worked together in the past. It was awesome. Always good when the process and the experience is as good as the output. So really glad you can be here. And it's the first time we've met. So I'm looking forward to hearing your perspectives. We're going to cover a lot today. We're going to talk about brands that sound fab and that are glossy and they're exciting and the value of that, but also the need to tell the whole story. We're going to talk about storytelling and employer branding and talent. And we're going to talk about the power of connection and relationships because you two worked together in the past. But I'll hand over to you. I'd love you, starting with you, Gareth, if you'd like to introduce yourself and tell us a bit about Schnitz.
Yeah, so Head of People and Culture, Schnitz Franchising, franchise network made up of 80 stores, 80 locations at the moment, network of 1,600 people, ranging from your team member right through to your multi-site operator, franchise partner. So incredibly diverse network. And yeah, I've been there for 5.5 years now.
And progressed up.
Yeah.
What was your first job there?
I came in as a P&C generalist, I believe, back in the day.
HR business partner.
Yeah.
And you hired him. Is that right?
Did.
Yes. Amazing. And when I first met you, you were at Blue
Illusion, yep, ladies' clothing brand.
Yeah.
Also based in Melbourne. And I remember going to one of your open seminars, and I still remember the Swan Care video you played that day. And I played it for my partner last night, and it still resonates.
Oh, it's so good. I love it too. I try not to show it all the time, but it's like a favourite first child. Do you know what I mean? Yep. Thanks very much. We'll find out more about Schnitz as we go through. But Gina, how about you?
So Gina Selak, I'm currently Executive General Manager for Sports Entertainment Group. So that's our holding entity. And we have a workforce of approximately 1,200. So half of that is permanent and the other half is contingent. So obviously working in sport, it's very seasonal. So we kind of dial up that workforce as needed. AFL is a really big season for us, but we certainly have expanded most recently into the racing world with our recent acquisition of RSN, which is the Trots radio. So yeah, I've been at SEN now for almost 4 years, and prior to that Schnitz, but consider myself industry agnostic. Started in telco and was there for over 10 years, and then a period with 7-Eleven during their, what I like to refer to as their four corners moment, which
wow.
was fascinating experience. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I love that diversity because you what do you say, industry agnostic? That makes a lot of sense to me because so much of what we're trying to do every day in people, culture, talent is agnostic. It's not the same. You need to flex to the conditions, the context, but those core principles are the same things, right?
People are people.
People are people, absolutely. Now, I've written down some questions because I really want to ask you some big ones. But I had a look at your website, your careers site, and you're in sports and entertainment. Your site tells me you connect brands with fans across multiple platforms, including radio, television, digital, print, stadium, and events, reaching over 3.5 million people every week. How cool does that sound? It's exciting. I'm always interested in employers and sector brands where there's energy and there's excitement. And for lots of people, that is already I'm predisposed to wanting to work for you. But there's always so much more below the surface, good and the bad, right? What's it really like working in this space?
What's it really like? We are a business, we're a publicly listed entity. So we're really a business like any other. And I think that's an interesting perception to manage. I consider myself really fortunate coming into this world, quite sports illiterate, and have really enjoyed my journey in terms of connecting to sport and our world of entertainment. But sports is the biggest social connector that we have in community. So in terms of our composition as a business, so we have the media part of our business, which is radio, and then also TV, which is known as Rainmaker. So a lot of the sport that you see on Channel 7 is us. And then we have a talent management arm, which we call Bravo. We have an app development team. team. We're in publishing. We publish the AFL Record. So really diverse. But what I find really interesting in our world is that we own women's sports teams. So we have 2 in the current WNBL league, and we have the Melbourne Mavericks, if you're into your netball.
Absolutely.
So I'm working with the business at a really, really interesting time in terms of the evolution of women in sport. And we have, a wonderful executive team of men and women, but certainly great representation of women exec, which is fabulous for sport. So we are certainly, I think, very different to what people would perceive. And the brand that we would need to attract the right fit for our team side of the business, we were talking about this, Gareth, is certainly very different to what we, would aim to attract for the media side of our business. Yeah. It's very different. The big learning for me, supporting teams versus working in business, very different culturally, very different profile of people that you get in those worlds as well.
That makes a lot of sense. And yes, I've signed up for Queensland Firebirds membership for me and my 2 girls.
Fantastic.
For the 2026 season, so I'm sure we'll see your team on the court.
Yeah.
It's super interesting. So if we break it down, apart from those different roles and the different types of roles, even within one of those roles, the motivations. I still remember when I was my first ever job, I was a business and community liaison manager in a school. It was some random position that had been created out of nothing, a non-teaching role. But one of the things I did is I got involved in work experience, helping organise this stuff. And I remember we were in North London in the UK, and one of the placements that we had was Arsenal Football Club, and every kid or every boy wanted that placement. And every year, the kid would go and come back and just be depressed. I just mop the floors every day. And it really was interesting because what the gloss and the promise and the hope versus somebody who went to somewhere that was very not glamorous, not known, not a household name, and they could have the best experience.
Perception versus reality.
Yeah. Again, I've worked with brands where there's a real connection, attachment to the brand or to the industry or to the idea of it. And actually, part of your EVP challenge and your employer branding challenge is to burst the bubble, bust the myth and say, hey, I think you said we're any other organisation. So how do you really cut through the noise and use that to inspire and attract? So this sport and the connection and the women's sport is wonderful too, but also say, pretty high performing, and I imagine it's pretty hard work, I imagine, and lots of change going on. So how do you tell that holistic story?
I don't think that we've nailed it yet from an external perspective, but I certainly do a great deal of work from an internal point of view to ensure that candidates are coming in eyes wide open, and just to really test, beneath the surface of those that are, particularly AFL fans or, be it netball, but just really, getting beneath that and ensuring that, they're also interviewing for the right reasons and the role is the right fit for them. Interestingly, I think so I worked on Collins Street in Melbourne, for 15 years and was really fortunate to have a nice little car park on Collins Street there. And then when I went to 7-Eleven, their head office at the time was in Mount Waverley, and we parked on a gravel car park, and I remember walking out in the shiny high heels thinking, where are And it turned out to be one of the best experiences, both from a learning perspective. I didn't realise how lost I was in the big corporate. And that was also a wonderful season for me for its own reasons. But just downtown Mount Waverley, and we didn't have many cafes to go to. So we gathered together over lunch and morning tea. And I still have some of my closest friends from that experience. It was so simple in so many ways, but it's so deeply enriching. So it's really
so interesting. I worked with a company that they said we do labour hire and our offices are prefabs on the side of a highway. And I said, tell me about the people inside the prefabs, because if you look at history, the worst conditions, the trenches of world wars, true camaraderie, true connection, true relationships are built, and it's an awful thing. We don't want to be in that situation, but I hear you completely. It's actually sometimes when there's less distraction, when there are less perks, that people can connect meaningfully.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, people galvanise around the experience.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, and again, even with the retail side, again, we work with some retail brands, some fashion brands, and you can use it and leverage it, but you do have to tell anyone who joins you because it's sport is probably going to be bitterly disappointed because there's a lot of work to do, right? As well.
And also, I think the part of our story that I think we have an opportunity to vocalise a little bit more loudly is around our regional roots. So a significant part of our CEO's why in terms of, building the business was that he grew up in regional Victoria. And so he's really driven. It's wonderful to hear him tell the story with passion around bringing content to, people that live in regional or remote Australia. And so our COO also actually has roots in regional Victoria, and so I have no doubt that they've hired with bias over the journey. But we have this wonderful country sensibility, and so no ego. It's all pretty level, and given our industry, that's probably still a feature of our culture and our people that surprises me in the best way.
I love it.
Yeah.
So sorry, not sorry about the bringing that in.
Yeah.
I remember working with Queensland Rugby League a few years ago, and what we ended up with then, we talked about an EVP that led with like sport, love what it can do.
Yeah, I love that.
Because all about, it was saying there's the attraction to the sport, and you say, for example, state of origin is the big one. But actually almost all the work they do and the deepest meaning for almost all their staff is the grassroots games. It's the fact that if it wasn't for a staff member who's living out in regional and doing this stuff, kids in a whole community wouldn't get access to sport, wouldn't get fitness. There's talk in the floods and still getting a game on. And when people started telling the stories, it was like it was the end of the game and they put an esky in the middle of the field and they just sat there, and it had been a massive day of games, and just to sit and be and say, we did this, away from the big prestigious stuff, just in the community. And it's interesting. It's the difference between, I guess, what might attract somebody into a brand versus why they stick around.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow, so much to unpack there. Let's talk to you, Gareth. I mean, you've got really diverse sector experience. We talked about it: fashion, well-being and fitness, food and hospitality now. All of those industries can be really attractive, especially to younger people.
Yep,
tends to be.
Definitely.
How do you ensure you're leveraging that but also balancing the fun with other dimensions or the other side of the coin?
Yeah, it all comes back to that level of authenticity. And so we've talked about this before through the work that we've done together, but it also aligns with our revised company values, and one of them is stay authentic. And so that's carried through from the previous years into the new iteration and the future of Schnitz. But telling someone that they're about to come in and have this amazing, shiny dream journey, it just doesn't land. They will walk into the store, it's lunch rush, and next thing you know, you've smell like chips. You've been washing dishes for 2 hours, and that's not what it's not for everyone. So, and that's, you need to be honest about that. It takes a certain type of person to really thrive in that restaurant rhythm. Same with fashion. Everyone wants to be like they want to be a fashion buyer.
Yeah.
And when you get in there and you see that the fashion buying isn't always just the trips to Milan.
Yeah.
There's a lot of work that goes behind it, and it's not as sexy as it might look as it does into the TV shows. So you really need to make sure, to your point, that candidate experience, and our people and talent partner does a brilliant job of it, really outlining what it's like to work in the business, the work that goes into it, the people that you'll meet, and there's the benefits that come with it. You come out a better rounded human through that restaurant experience as well. You really take away the life skills, but yeah, it's definitely not for everyone. I think you need to own that.
The other thing that's interesting with Schnitz, I mean, you were fascinating to listen to, your team and your founders, and if you think about, fast food or hospitality, hospo, there's an assumption that it's pretty much the same, but it really isn't. And there's so many, we found so many things that contributed to that, versus any other, like Guzman and Gomez. I'm not, throwing shade at anybody, but just a very different thing to Macca's and whatever. And part of the thing with Schnitz was the story and the storytelling. There was this real, I hope it's not I hope it's appropriate to say, but it was a very Melbourne thing actually. Like it felt very emotional in your business, and there was a real respect for heritage and family and connection. Not we're all one big family, but this path and this journey. And what we found was really interesting, and your take on this would be interesting, having been there as well previously. It cascaded to everybody that there was a real respect for everybody's journey. There was people were interested in, even if someone was passing through, they were really interested in the human, and it felt quite a little bit less hypey than some hospo environments. Is that right? Is that still the case?
Yeah, I still remember my interview with Gina, getting the brief around the family and Roman and Tom and Andrew, and how it really did come from a real foodie culture, and they loved food, they loved quality ingredients. And I remember getting that impression first thing off the bat, and that still is true to today. Like we've got the kids coming in at 15, sometimes coming in, it's their first job, and they're learning about the quality, and they're learning about the passion that Roman has for that perfect golden crumb. Yeah. And it flows right through. So we've had people come from being on cook in restaurant, and then they come through to the support office, and that experience that they bring with them then cascades up and down. Yeah. So it's just that consistency it's beautiful. And
I remember meeting with those brothers, those guys. It was so real. I mean, it was, and that they
live it, they breathe it.
They were fighting each other, they were fighting themselves. They were settling each other down. It was so human, and again, very Melbourne, kind of that. Call it as it is, no
and
gloss.
It speaks to a level of skin in the game.
Yeah, totally.
We are still family owned, and that cascades through to a franchise who has their house on the line, and then it cascades down to the cook who's got a family to feed at home. Yeah. Everyone is in their own way managing their own little family unit and their family business. So, and
the skin in the game linked to the story really played through. The EVP we did with you, and I still love it. You know, there's huge theme of storytelling and the story you're crafting and so on, and we separated out structurally the come and be front of house and do this for a period, but also the career opportunity beyond that. But the lead line is I love the most, which is own it while it's hot. Yeah. And what was really interesting for us in doing this was making it energized enough but not flippant. Yeah. And that ownership piece. Your founders weren't just saying, "Oh, come and you can have ownership here." They were saying, "We need you to. We need you to care about every single schnitzel. We need you to care about bloody good chips, right? Yeah, every chip matters,
and the hustle,
and they're pushing for consistency." So it was really interesting lining up the EVP, what you get, and what it's going to feel like, with what we need from you. How did that EVP land for you? Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, it speaks to that franchise nature of the business, and the own it while it's hot. It's something that really was able to cascade through the business. So whether you are coming in as the office coordinator, you're on the pans cooking schnitzels, or you're owning the franchise itself, that's what we want. We wanted the same thing from everyone. So it cascaded really well. We've now got the revision on the careers page. That video we did about in Mornington is still
going
as
strong,
true as ever.
Love it.
Yeah, Laura and Dan, they were great. Yeah. So it's been really good.
And for us, it was a challenge, a good challenge, in that again you're trying to keep the pace. It can't be slow moving and emotional, but at the same time there was a real depth to those two people. For a start, you could see some depth between them, and I remember we shot them both together. And that really added to it in itself, because you could see the relationship between them.
They bounced off each other like you would on shift.
Yeah,
and
totally.
It was great to watch.
Totally. And how's it gone for you? Has it supported you in the recruitment side of things?
Yeah, definitely. Flo, who looks after the recruitment, I hear her on her calls, and she's referencing it. Yeah, it's really great.
And that's the thing, right? We talk about this a lot. It's no good just having a nice EVP. It's what you're doing with it. And a lot of people think what you're doing with it is put it on your careers site and putting out some socials. That's just
it's got to live and breathe.
Yeah, totally, absolutely. Makes total sense. Gina, let's bring it back to you. I'd love to hear more about your work there. We always say that any work in this space, not just employer branding, anything on talent strategy is about how do we help this organisation win because of the people we have and how they feel and how they behave. So it's a business solution to a business problem. What are the opportunities you're chasing in your business that affect people? What are the problems you're trying to solve when you think about recruitment, retention and ongoing performance?
Yeah, I think we find ourselves at an interesting time, don't we, in terms of AI being a disruptor. And I think working through the impact on our people strategy. So kind of looking at skills, as they relate to roles, and looking at what elements of skill we can augment. I think we're not there yet. We're probably, I think we've made a good start in terms of our AI journey, but I see that becoming a key part of our people strategy. And then supporting our people through that. There's probably a little bit of nervousness around that disruption. And then it's interesting if we think about, from a systems perspective, I'm very much a systems thinker. And then thinking about, that systems strategy, and do we now wait for for AI to kind of drive what we need, enable us from a people point of view. So, and then, I think unlike any other time, we have that geopolitical, disruption that is occurring, and unlike any other time in this country, there is a direct impact on our teams and people. And I think we have to take that into consideration. So we have a climate, I think, unlike what we've ever had before, certainly from a business perspective. What's great for our world is that we can balance that out with sport. We're getting to the end of the AFLW women's final, which we filmed through Rainmaker. WNBL is about to kick off, and we've done a lot of rigour to get the team set up there. So it's great to be able to leverage the energy that sport brings to kind of buoy our workforce.
Yeah, it must be really challenging. I mean, I'll call it, I'm sick to death of everybody telling me how wonderful AI is going to be for humans. We don't know, and there's so many things that's going to change. The idea of AI freeing us all up loads of time. Well, what are we going to do with that time? And our employers still going to pay us to do that. So my own business is going through plenty of change as well, because we're looking at markets saying, what are people going to pay for in the new world? And media is so affected by all of that stuff. How do you keep people with you and supported when you can't really make lots of promises, and when times are changing?
Yeah, I think it's about transparent communication, and we certainly are just at the start of our journey. And I think being sport and entertainment, one of our verticals is ballparks. It's an event delivery business. Right. So if I think about that, if I think about our teams, people really are at the centre of...
I love it.
And talent as well. Talent they're our people, they're also our product, which is interesting as well.
Yeah. But it's bringing it back. I mean, I know so many businesses that are certainly not growing right now, and it's not just shutting down, it's not just getting smaller for the sake of it. It's saying we maybe need to reinvent what we are. We need to rethink where we're putting our focus, and my business is no different. There's pain in that for people who aren't able to continue on that journey with you, for people who do continue but find that harder to make that change. But there is so much opportunity on the other side. Unless we're going to give up on humans, there's opportunity, and it's going to get fascinating. But I agree with you. There's a period that's going to be a bit, do we wait and see? Do we act? What do we do? And I think a lot of people that we're talking to across Australia are experiencing that right now.
It's the ability to evolve.
Yeah.
And is this a period of time similar to, when accountants started using calculators? I don't think we know yet. I don't think we still are, humans that are driving business. And I heard an interesting reference recently that AI has really been around in a form since the 50s, as have video cameras. But it really is about humans bringing that to market as well. So I think it will be fascinating, and I don't think there's any doubt that we are at a point of significant transformation and change, and we are sort of moving to more of a cognitive economy. And so how do we dial up knowledge, and how do we leverage that?
And there are so many other headwinds, as you say, the geopolitical factors. There's so much going on all at the same time, and it'll be very interesting to see how that plays out. How about you, Gareth? Where's Schnitz at? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to achieve?
Yeah, look, we've new change of leadership in our CEO earlier this year, which is really exciting. So we are now reevaluating that strategy, bedding down what the next 5 years looks like, and getting ducks in row to really not hit the ground running, but keep running. So running as you build it to a certain extent, which is exciting. Yep. But it comes with its own like pressure tests as you go. So that's getting everything sorted so that we can really skyrocket.
And how do you, for a question for both of you, how do you, when you're going through times of change, good and bad and everything else, how do you attract people in, ensuring they come in with the right mindset for that? You know, I've seen organisations where they deliberately hide all the problems, and it's just so stupid because people are going to show up and find out straight away, and the damage that does is pretty harsh. So how do you prepare candidates, prepare hires for what they're coming into?
Honesty, transparency. To your point before, it's all around making sure you're honest with yourself first and foremost, so that you can then be best set up to lead your teams, support your teams, bring people into the business. When you've got a really solid understanding of what's ahead of you and you are honest about it, then you know what you need and you know what the team around you needs to look like, and you build it around you to enable. And then, you collectively just keep chipping away and making it better. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. We're talking a lot at the moment about storytelling and how I would say people are really good at telling stories about the past and they're quite good at telling stories about the future state, as in the vision. They're rubbish at telling the live story, like the live commentary of a game, right? See what I did there? But I think that's what we've got to get better at. It's narrating the journey that we're on, the 2 steps forward, the 3 steps back. And more it's connecting candidates, of course, but also your current team to what we're trying to do every day, and the fact, and maybe reminding people it's not easy, and it's not a given that we're going to get there. You know, my kids want to believe that it's all going to be easy and that the world is certain and sure. And right now they're pretty young, and right now I'm going to do all I can to help them feel that way. But as they get older, the journey is to say, no, life isn't fair, and things are difficult, and it's not a certain outcome for us. We've got to fight for this. And I see a parallel to staffing, you know, and culture.
I was talking to Gina earlier. One experience, we had a team member come over from Chile on a working holiday visa, and it's essentially been a game of snakes and ladders because it's not linear. That journey to success in the franchising world, in hospitality, it has its peaks and troughs. Team member comes in as a cook, working holiday visa, gets residency, makes her way to a store manager role within the company portfolio. And then due to decisions outside of her control, commercial leasing decisions, we've closed that store, and I've redeployed her into another store, and then that store closed.
Wow.
During all of this, she's had a child, and just more recently, she's back in the network again, partnering with a franchise partner with a buy-in, and is now on track to then have her own franchise.
Oh, wow.
So, and it kind of speaks to what you're saying. It's not always a given, and it can be a really hard slog. She has worked her absolute butt off to get where she is, and it's a testament to that hospitality grit as well. So,
can we talk about that a bit? The hospitality grit. I'm fascinated with hospo and retail to a degree as well. But there's hospitality legends, right? And then there's people who are just doing it for the sake of it, and I've been so inspired by people who get such a sense of validation from the classic is an unhappy customer that leaves a really happy one. I remember I worked with Campos Coffee back in the day before they were acquired by JD Peet's, and I remember someone saying to me, you know, we had one where a customer came in and she'd had a coffee and it didn't turn out well. She wasn't happy with it, so she brought it back up. And they made her another one, and it was bad again. And then she said, "Oh, just get me a peppermint tea." And it was the duty manager or the shift manager who went over and said, "I'm really sorry this happened. I can't give you a peppermint tea. You're at Campos Coffee. Please let me make it." And that customer left happier and more of an advocate, having gone through the bad experience. You know, even more of an advocate than they would have been if there hadn't been a bad experience. And that is all dependent on that one individual to fight for the values of that business.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what was so interesting, actually, working at Schnitz and having, Eastern European family founders, I can resonate. It's my background as
Right,
well,
yeah.
and so that relationship with the schnitzel is a precious one. But we would have some great D&Ms into the evening. I would with the owners, the brothers, and we would talk about service, you know, and the nobility in service. And you're either that's kind of, there's a little bit of, that's part of you, and you
got
get
it,
that.
or you don't,
You
in a
don't.
way.
Yeah. You can't. That is very hard to train.
And there's a parallel. We do a lot of work in aged care and disability, and I feel a real parallel between hospitality and aged care.
It's a service.
It's a service, and it's selfless, and yet people who do it consistently well will say, no, I get as much as I give, because it's that vibe, it's that buzz. So interesting because I remember the brothers really connecting to that as well, and they're almost astonished when people didn't have that and didn't show that, because they could see it and sense it so clearly.
But I think it's interesting, isn't it? I remember once being at an OD luncheon seminar, and there was a lady who was in a senior organisational development role for a funeral company. And she shared some stories, and this one really stayed with me. They were doing a piece around their employment brand and, surfacing some of those really, deeply rich and emotional stories. And one of them was they spoke to their, I don't have the right term for the people that dig the graves.
Let's go grave digger.
Grave digger.
Let's do that.
They spoke to their grave diggers, and there was someone who shared in a conversation that had been doing that job for 35 years. And I mean, the stories, to this day I could get emotional. You know, they families will approach them and share that you are the last person that handled my loved one, and the depth of that. And you would never really think about that, but it's just so incredibly moving. And I think it's interesting, from a human resources or people and culture perspective, and often our function is expected to have all the answers in terms, I'm not engaged, I'm not happy. But, we all, I think, would have a better sense of fulfillment if we dug in a little deeper for our own purpose.
Oh, that's so interesting. Good call getting her on. This is, I
You're
think,
welcome.
so many things, but we worked with a funeral business as well. And I remember meeting a guy called Ray. Ray was fascinating, but we've got a video of him doing a careers video. If you're trying to recruit funeral directors, where do you start, right? And his opening line in the video is, no one wants to meet a funeral director. And it was so powerful because it opens up this door. But all these people we kept speaking to, whichever role they were in the mortuary or whatever, they'd say, I know it's really weird, but I really want to do it, and I feel really good about it. And some of the folks who are preparing the bodies and so on, they'll say you have to be a bit kooky and a bit weird, like there is a thing in there. But most of the people, I think Ray said, people often say to me, it must be awful dealing with that much death. And he said, but I feel like I'm dealing with a lot of life. I'm helping the family or the loved ones see that person off in the most respectful, kind, loving way, and then move on towards the next phase of life. And it blew me away. And these are everyday people just speaking unscripted and sharing their perspective. But bringing it back, the piece around HR and people in culture, again, how do we avoid becoming the parent to these people? I was just talking at an event earlier on, and I said the same thing, that there's a lot of noise out there on social media, especially towards younger audiences, that says, don't work too hard. What is it? Your boss won't be there on your deathbed, or if you're ill, they'll dump you in a second, so don't do it. We're missing out. If we heed all of that, we're missing out on all that work can do for our identity and for our sense of self. And I liked your idea, if we dig a bit deeper. But everyone's exhausted and addicted to their phones. So how do we do that? How do you, in people and culture, move people towards that more positive mode?
Yeah, it's interesting, and I think the answer to that is probably different for each generation. Actually, I'll share a little story. So my oldest son is finishing his 4th year of law. And for any working mums that might be listening, I had so much work mum guilt, but I did influence him in hopefully a positive way. So he went off, he worked for a little while for a public injury law firm part-time in the call centre. And he went off, he'll kill me for sharing the story, but for his interview this morning, so he's going back to work, hopefully, potentially for another area for that law firm. And employment law is where he's focused. And so over the table this morning, I said to him, so how do you plan to share and reference the experience that you had and what you took away? And, he was thoughtful about it because obviously employment law is the focus. And I said, maybe you can touch on those people that would call and were injured and in states of trauma, and that you were there to facilitate and to ease their mind and to step them through a process and hope and and you could just see a shift, which I don't get because he's now a lawyer that I can't argue with in many fights with. So it was a moment that stood out to me. But at the end of the day, despite our generation and who we work for, we are all human. And those rudimentary traits of being human around connection and validation and belonging, which I think all of that can be surfaced via storytelling.
Yes.
Despite the industry, there's just richness. It's that connects us, and that's the human experience.
Yeah. Did you come to my seminar earlier? I was talking about exactly this and it comes back to Maslow, the hierarchy of needs. It's the same stuff. We want to belong. We want to feel of consequence. We want to grow. And at the top of it all, we want to feel this self-actualization. We want to know that it's worth it and that I'm worth it and that I'm adding some value.
And that ability to bring whole self to work. I remember early days at Schnitz, I was reinforced a very, very strong lesson by Gina, and that was life happens while we work. It's no good to just turn up, do your job, go home. You need to be able to bring your baggage, chuck it on, bring it to work, and the ability to work through that in that safe environment, if you're provided it means you're a better employee at the end of the day. And your ability to provide a better customer experience or provide a better experience for the person who's come in to your office that's got a problem, if you've got that level of compassion built in, then you're a better HR practitioner, 100%.
Yeah, I've got a problem with it though, and it's interesting. So I come at everything as hopefully a half expert in what I do, in the culture, in the leadership space, in the employer branding space, but also as a dad of young kids and an employee, and as a manager and CEO of a business, and actually the people I'm employing. And I look at all our clients, look at all the organisations we're working with, I look at society overall. I think that the greatest enemy to progressive, supportive workplaces and leaders is entitlement. And so how do we stop this? I've met a lot of leaders, a lot of businesses where they bend over backwards for their staff, and the staff get used to it, and then the dynamic is wrong. And the problem I think is that it's two sides. It's us versus them.
Overcorrected.
Overcorrecting. So for what it's worth, my theory, and it's proving true so far, but the greatest antidote to entitlement is contribution. So it's giving people really clear roles to do. But that's hard in the day-to-day, right?
I think, though, we are facing into a generation of workers that are emerging that don't want to work for people. They do want to work with people. And I think if we come from that paradigm, then it's much easier to have that contribution conversation. And we had them at Schnitz, and I have them now. We don't have position descriptions. We have contribution profiles, because it's important for people to think about how they are contributing and to own that. And there's so much power in language. So I think some of those shifts can be achieved in the language that we use. But to your point, actually, when I think about that discretionary effort and the path that some of us, I can certainly say for my generation, that we were on, and the loyalty that we had for business, all of that has shifted. But that sense of belonging and contribution and purpose, that does remain very human. And I think about when I started at Schnitz and we were building restaurants, and we had a team that were, they had previously worked in and led restaurants, and then they formed a team that would travel from state to state and they would open new restaurants. And this was a great deal of grit and work that went into opening a new restaurant. And they worked over and above. It was, for a new restaurant, you're, typically working 3 weeks straight, potentially anywhere from 12 to 14, 16-hour days as it gets closer. And they worked and showed up as though they did have skin in the game and as though they were opening their own establishment. And I see similarly for us in our SEN world, it was approximately 2 years ago that we established the Melbourne Mavericks team. So a little bit of that background was that the Super Suncorp Netball League needed another team, and Collingwood had owned the team that we purchased, Collingwood Football Club, and so they needed the team in order for the league to continue. And so there was, that was a decision that was made quite quickly, and it was an all hands on deck to establish this team. And I was really fortunate to attend their awards a couple of weeks ago on a Friday night, and they had honoured some legacy players and contributors to the sport. And you just again are reminded of, this is why it was so important for us to get this team up. And the netballers that we had that were working for us, I mean, it reminded me so much of those new restaurant openings.
And they're still the same. We just opened Melbourne Airport, and ungodly hours of the morning to get there and make sure that everything was going to be ready for that open date, because it's D-Day. So they pull together in a way that is so admirable, and they do, to your point, they really act like they have that skin in the game. But the passion is just,
So we've stumbled on a rich theme that, in my ignorance, I hadn't foreseen in preparing this, but this combination, sports, hospo, coming together, achieving things. So
teams.
Through the work, through the act of working, through the act of creating something, putting something on, building something, you create meaning and connection that then scales. And yet in many industries, in many sectors, that seems to have moved away. I talk a lot about during crisis, communities come together, people come together. I spent many years living in London, and terrorist attack, everybody gets on really, really well. The rest of the time they hate each other. But as soon as there's a crisis or something awful happens, they come together for a couple of weeks or a few weeks. In your environments, in sport and in hospo, it's always on. It's always on. So
in a restaurant, that's the lunch rush. It's dinner rush. It's every day. You hit that peak, and everyone has to band together, and then it scales right up to things like restaurant openings or grand finals. Like it can be as small as just that lunch rush, right up to a huge event.
We had an amazing experience this year in our business. So the Legends game, you may be familiar with, is a football game where former AFL legends come together to play. And so I'm not intimately close to the history of, but it was once a well-known event, and then there was a pause for a little while, and our business turned that on, the event this year, and we kind of went from right from the event part of it through to televising and mobilising partners to support, and it was extraordinarily successful. But what a vibe it created, and that for us to throw an event like that in the mix just ahead of AFL finals, which is peak period for us, and what follows finals is trade radio for us. So we spend 4 weeks talking about, obviously the players that will trade, etc. So it's Christmas in retail is that finals period for us. But yeah, I was reminded once again, just the energy and there were edges together. Showing. It was some for all of us, but that pull together and that feeling of being part of something so special is really awesome. So I think the moral of it for me is that ongoing iteration or connection to purpose. Like, what are we here for? Who is the customer, and how are we serving them, and who are we delivering value to? And that is obviously a little bit different for everyone, but reinforcing that is just so critically important.
And it's an antidote to the idea that young people are entitled and don't want to work and don't want to do anything. It's getting people into mode and giving them that space to achieve.
Yeah, and I think we do have to be cautious with some of those generalisations around young people. I've been really fortunate to lead a team of young people for a little while now, and have had some extraordinary work ethics that have showed up in some of our youth. So,
the stereotypes are obscene. I mean, I think, and so wrong. I see a narrative about, someone said to me, the Maslow hierarchy of needs, they said it's switched now. All they want is to change the world. But this is not true. This is a generation now coming through that doesn't even believe they're going to own their own home. And I mean, especially with AI and everything else, it's, well, where do I start? I wouldn't want to be in my early 20s right now, work-wise. It's a challenging moment. And again, the Instagram, the TikTok, everything else. Instagram, how old am I? There's all of that and what's broadcast. But actually, you can get under that skin pretty quickly and see a desire for real connection and belonging in a world where that isn't so prevalent anymore. How important is leadership and individual leadership in actually shaping cultures where people can thrive and perform? I know that sounds like an obvious question, but I'd like to
everything. Yeah. I would look at, we've got department heads right down to the team leaders on shift, and I mean, there's the old trope that people stick around for their teams and for their leaders, and there's an element of brand loyalty there, definitely, but it really is, it's people working with people and for people, and that dynamic. You can walk into a Schnitz restaurant and you can tell that which leader is on. And you can tell if the franchise partner is there, and they shape it so intrinsically. Like, I mean, we've got Ballarat, for example, where you walk in there and the culture that have created in that store is just second to none. And the passion that flows through to the guest experience, right through to when you see them at conference and they show up in that way is just, it's the consistency there is amazing.
Amazing. I'm going to ask you in a little while, I'll give you some time to percolate, but about a story that you would pull of a moment that mattered to you, or a story you said, wow, that was really awesome, an example. And one that I remember from somebody, it was a small thing, but somebody we spoke to at Schnitz who said that when she started, she was too afraid to pick up the phone, to speak on the phone. She really struggled with that. And she didn't just say, I got used to it. She said, now I teach everyone else how to do it. And she'd had a situation where I think about 2 years after she'd started with you, somebody new had started and had the same challenges. And she was able to sit with that empathy and work with that person. And it was just a wonderful, she told the story much better than I did, but it was a wonderful embodiment of that idea of growth, of somebody who comes in, and that's what we talk about in your EVP, right? Wherever you're at in your journey and your story, we want to help you create that
life
story.
Skills.
Yeah, with you. And part of that is work with us for 6 months, a year, and we'll help you with your resume, But part of it is stay with us and journey with us. And what you said, that life doesn't get left at the door. So that was a really great story. But I'll ask you about that. I'll give you a bit of a moment to reflect on that. But I did also wanted to ask you about you two and connection, the power of connection relationships. Because Gareth, when I said come on this podcast, please, you said, I don't know. And then you said I'd love to invite Gina too. And I can see why. Tell me, you were Gareth's boss?
Oh, was it?
Do you remember when you first met? Was it the interview or was it something else?
Yeah, it was. Yeah. I was back at Blue Illusion, and it was, January 2020, which we all remember for different reasons. Yeah. And rocked up to the interview, shiny offices in South Yarra, really exciting. Met Gina, loved it. I was like, this is it. I'm home. It was, straight from the get-go. And then the world fell apart. And
didn't you say to me that for ages you weren't physically in contact with anybody? Was that right?
Yeah. So I actually, when COVID really hit, and Schnitz was going through their kind of that JobKeeper, we've got some people on, some people off. I remember the call from Gina being like, it's like, you're our guy, but now's not the right time.
Yeah.
So I stuck around for Blue Illusion for a little while, and then 6 months later, got the call again. We stayed in touch through that time, and then I ended up moving across by July that year. So yeah.
And it was tough. I was exceptionally fastidious about choosing my HR partner, and so it was a long sourcing process that we had. And I remember, I actually remember the day that I got the call. The girls were interviewing in the team, and they called, and they were on a speaker together, and said, "Gina, we found the one."
Wow.
We found your partner, and certainly that was the case. And so unfortunate circumstances when COVID hit, but Gareth and I just have an excellent chemistry. I am very passionate and excitable and strategic, and Gareth is level-headed and a great, wise sounding board. And so we just made a great team. And it's interesting, isn't it, when you think about trying to attract the right people,
Yes.
or the right processes, and all of those things are so exceptionally important. But when it comes to it, it is that kind of chemistry click that, again, it's that human interaction that brings that to us. So I think it's so important in these roles where you need to get speed to trust, and you have to have high trust. So it's
And a level of self-awareness as well.
Yeah.
And knowing what I lacked and what I needed to learn and absorb from Gina. And I remember coming in pretty green, to be honest. Like I'd had a couple of HR roles, but I'd not held anything in hospitality. I'd not held anything in a business that size. So I came into the hospo franchising world, and I was wide-eyed. I was like working it out as I was running, and I had the ability to learn and be stewarded through that in an amazing way. And it's been really, really pivotal part of the journey.
Oh, wonderful. And you mentioned the word trust, like that seems to be recurring every day right now. I'm hearing that in the context of AI, in the context of humans, the context of leadership, in the context of political and economic challenges, that importance of trust and honesty. How important has that been in your relationship?
It's the only thing that got us through.
Yeah. Right from the jump, when I had to make that dreaded phone call and ask Gareth to trust and hold until we could re-engage again. I mean, that's how we started. So that's been vitally important, and I think foundational to any great relationship, and especially in business. And it's interesting, I think we all probably have a slightly different nuanced definition of trust, but it is made and built, isn't it, in all of those little moments of interaction. And sometimes when we zoom out and remind ourselves, there is such a big chunk of our life that we spend shoulder to shoulder with the people that we work with. And I look around and, have been in business for too many decades to mention, but, my closest friends have come from my work environment primarily, outside of, some of those early childhood friends. So that says something.
You navigate the big moments, the big career moments, the big personal moments. You're still managing all of those while you rock up to work, and that is intrinsically becomes part of your experience.
And that's what I'm worried about. The separation of work and life. There's this lovely idea of work-life balance. I talk about work-life integration all the time, and I think if you run your own business, it's just a blur. But you talked about being a working mum, right? I think I'm a custody parent, so I'm when they're with their mother, I'm working, I'm all on. When they're with me, as much as possible, I'm with them. And I heard something about 75% of the time you'll spend with your child is before they're 11. And that terrifies people. And I think there's a reaction to go, right, don't work, focus on the kids. My take is my kids get a better me when I'm really inspired by my work, when I'm doing the right things, and when I can create the boundaries to obviously separate. But again, my concern is that in society we're at risk of making work the enemy. Focus on life and, life's too short and so on, versus this idea of what work and connection and achieving things together can bring.
Oh, it's a huge enabler. You need both. And finding the balance, to your point, that coined phrase, work-life balance, is difficult, sometimes impossible. But if you are able to bring both together and you are surrounded by the right support network, both in the work environment and outside it, then you can really kind of play them together and get a better outcome. I mean, I watched you manage work and family for a couple of years, and I always admired the way that you were able to both compartmentalize but also harmonize, I think, is the best way to,
And I have taught my kids so much through my work, and I would not have done it any other way. They would be, both of them as boys would be very different had they not had that connection through my work.
Yeah.
So, just so important. And I do worry, as much as I am a proponent of, we now enter more into these lifestyle contracts as opposed to employment contracts. And I think absolutely flexibility has its place. But I also am a staunch believer in working with people together. Again, there is so much social learning that occurs that I worry we won't. If I think about my son going into the workplace, my hope is that he is working shoulder to shoulder with people and in communities of teams, so that he does learn. And then through, to your point, Gareth, when we think about life and the things that occur, there is sometimes no better solace found than in a team community. So if it is an issue that you've gone through with family or friends or circle outside of work, and then you have this comfort of people that are your people. So
it's so interesting, and I there is that trend towards everything at home and everything. I've met and engaged with and worked with a number of people who will say, I crave connection, I really miss that one, but I don't want to commute, and I don't want to be, I want to work from home, from my bedroom. That's the problem, right? It's the same as anything else. I don't want to get up and go for a run, but if I, believe it or not, occasionally I do go for a run, and when I do, you never regret it. You never forget it, you never regret a swim. In the same way, maybe we used to have that where you've got to get up and you've got to go and do it, and then you were glad you did.
Yes.
Whereas we don't have to anymore. It's a very different thing, right? It feels like maybe that's not all positive.
I agree. I read a research study recently that spoke to alarming rates of, mental health illness and concerns, and there are correlations between people working at home in isolation. It's much like, to your point around physical fitness and even our nutritional health, we don't always want to eat the salad. I'd much rather have the chocolate cake or the cheese, but we do so because we know it's good for us. And that lead lag effect, there is, we see the benefit of those healthy choices in the medium to longer term. It's much the same in terms of working and connecting with people. So it might be an inconvenience to do an early drop off, or, and I can, I know I've experienced it. And, the traffic is bothersome at times. All of that is real. But the benefit of those connections, and for our young cohorts who are emerging into the workplace, it is also an opportunity. You never know when you might have that water cooler connection with a senior leader, and you might share your aspirations, and how that can help facilitate internal mobility as well. I mean, there's just so much.
The one that gets me, and even before, when everybody was still in offices, or a lot of people were, because of phones. I always remember sitting in the room before the meeting started and everyone was on their phone. I think Simon Sinek talks about that as well. And then the meeting starts and they put it down and they're on. And now it's not even that. Now it's switch on your camera and go. Maybe switch on your camera. And again, I think maybe we are potentially missing something there. That's a really challenging one. We need a second podcast, because I want to ask you one last question before we run out of time, and that was about those stories. Tell me a story about a moment that has mattered to you, or a moment when you went, that's Schnitz, or that's wherever I was working at the time, Sports Entertainment Network. Just that either a real example of your EVP, or just go, that was a really cool thing where work mattered.
It stumped me.
I will share one. So I think I mentioned entering into the world of sports was new for me, and I wasn't very sports literate, and we were we still try to connect the teams part of our business to the media or other parts of our business, and so our CEO of Teams had arranged for our Bendigo Spirit women to come in, and it was just a talk session with some of the female executive. And what I do recall is the boardroom was lined up in rows of seats, and the coach and assistant coach came in and dispersed those seats and created a circle for everyone. And we sat around that circle, and the stories that the women shared, some phenomenally impressive women who work in the for the NDIS or in aged care, but they just have such a deep love and connection through sport that they play, continue to play for the Spirit. And it was interesting. I felt so humbled to be in that room and privileged to be part of the stories that were being shared, but also eye-opening in terms of, the leap that we have yet to make in terms of women's sports.
Absolutely.
And that comparison, to the men's world.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was just a moment in time for me that was interesting.
How are you feeling about the future of women's sports?
Hugely optimistic. Hugely optimistic. I will say, I often wonder. I am in an environment where I work for a CEO who walks the walk when it comes to women in sport and really backs them in, and obviously we own women's sports teams, and I'm just privileged to attend some great events where there are women who've been extremely successful in sport and paving the way for those in the future. So I often wonder, is it because I'm immersed in this world so I feel like we're on the precipice of a change, and how can we not be with some of the phenomenal women that we have in the world of sport? And I was discussing this with a colleague recently, or is it the case that there is a shift in the zeitgeist of the world, and that we are progressing women in sport? So
I love that. And for what it's worth, I'm not in the bubble at all, and I'm seeing big change as well, and it's really positive. And my kids are currently 12 and 9 years old, so I'm really excited for that, not just from the sports angle, but for all of it. Be an interesting chapter ahead.
Yeah.
Gareth, you can pick a story.
Yeah.
Or you can tell me, what are you most excited about looking to the future?
No, I'm going to go with the story. I still remember we had our office coordinator role vacant, and we were big on that pipeline, kind of the journey I spoke to before, around team member to franchise partner or team member to support office, just providing that career path. And it was watching it come to fruition that really, and it was my first-hand experience watching it come to fruition. We had someone who'd been in restaurant and they'd been out in our Darry Warren Fountaingate restaurant for I think 7 or 8 years at the time. They come through as a cook, spent time there. They had an interest in the kind of events and that kind of side of things. So we put the ad out there, had an interview, started as an office coordinator, and then I ended up with a vacancy within the HR team and didn't have the formal training per se, but work ethic to boot, and just really had the attitude to say yes and work it out with me. And that you can't put a price on that.
No, absolutely.
So yeah, then went from the office coordinator into people and culture coordinator role, and was with us for a couple of years. Ended up assisting me in organising the national conference. So that journey from on the pans, cooking that perfectly golden brown schnitzel, to then bringing the national network together for the conference, that journey itself and watching that unfold and watching her grow and develop, because she was quite a shy individual, and watching that kind of unfold over time was just really heartwarming. And the ability to have the Darduks allow us to facilitate that on so many different levels is, really, really exciting.
Wow. So we started with all the multifaceted nature of brands and not just sticking to the gloss, and we've ended up with connection and purpose and achievement and identity through team. Wow. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.